Hi everybody, this is Thomas with my third game development video journal for YouTube. I'm still going really strong in my quest here to become an independent game developer, and I got some really cool stuff to show you this week, so I'm pretty excited about that. Someone asked me about my project and what I'm actually working on. Am I just learning this just for fun? No, I have a lot of ideas. I want a fantastic career as a game developer, and I have many ideas of games that I'd like to make. But, a lot of people say, start with a simple project like Pong or Tetris or whatever. Well, I have a project in mind that is going to fill two roles. One, it'll help me learn how to do things, and two, it'll actually be a complete game that I could be able to sell or give to somebody. So I'm working on that, but I'm not going to give you too much information because I want to wait till I'm ready to reveal it and put a really cool video out there and just sort of hit everybody with that and show them this game. So in these videos, unfortunately, I'm not going to show you too much of my specific game that I'll be working on, but I'm still going to show you using some generic sprites and background tiles and things like that, and you'll see some of that today. So without any further delay, I'm going to show you what I did. So here we go. I got my project open. I'm going to build it, and we're going to compile and run it for you so you can see what's going on. And there we are. It's Mega Man. Pretty sweet, huh? Let me tell you, it is a lot more fun to animate a character and do something that resembles an actual game than move a dot around the screen. So anyway, Mega Man will run back and forth when you use the left and right arrow key. Space bar controls his jumping. And if you stand there for a few seconds, about 3.5, then he'll blink. So I have done these things to try to mimic how Mega Man moves and is controlled in the actual original games for the NES, which, by the way, if you haven't played, I would heartily recommend that you do. I don't have one single game that's my favorite game of all time, but Mega Man 2 is way up there and would tie with others for first place. So if you haven't experienced the greatness of it, you got to. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what's going on here. Let me run this again and open up my console, and you can actually see some output here. You see over here it says current status. It tells you what Mega Man is doing. Blinking, standing. His default state is standing. When you start running left or right, he enters the motion state, and back to standing when you stop. After 3.5 seconds or so, he enters a blinking state and then back to regular standing. When you jump, he goes into a jump and then he goes to a falling state when he's reached the apex of the jump. So these states overall will control what the character is doing at any given time. I needed to build in some sort of feature to a way to limit the animation to its proper speed. You can see right now that when I run back and forth, Mega Man's really booking. His frames are going way faster than they should for that particular animation. So I needed a way to slow that down. So I want to show you that now. What I did is I just slowed down using a timer the rate at which these frames would show. So instead of showing one every single time the game loop updated, it now waits a certain amount of time based on the timer before it advances the frame. Let me show you how that's done. So it's right here. If the status of the player equals motion, meaning if the player is moving, we're going to do one of two things. Either we're already running and we need to advance a frame, or we haven't actually started the running animation and we need to initiate it. So if the player is moving and the frame equals 0 or the frame equals 1, meaning Mega Man is standing there or he's blinking, then we're going to set to frame 2, which is the initial running frame, and we're going to start the player timer. Now every time this game loop goes through, it's going to check right here. It's going to say if status equals P motion. If we're moving still, yeah, the status is going to equal P motion. Now the frame is not equal to 0 or 1. We already initialized it to 2. So Mega Man's already running. So that is right out. What we're going to be doing is we're going to check every time if the player timer has reached 100 milliseconds. Each frame is going to be shown for 100 milliseconds. So if the frame has been shown that long, then we're going to update to the next frame and we're going to start the player timer over. So that's a pretty easy way of just updating that frame every 100 milliseconds and we're all set. The next thing down here is I'm looping the running animation. So if the status is Mega Man is moving and the frame count is greater than 5, we're going to put that frame count back to 2. That's effectively going to serve to loop this running animation over and over between those frames. And let me show you the file with the sprite sheet. We're disregarding this bottom row for now where Mega Man's facing right. We'll just talk about left. So this first frame is 0, next one's 1, And then 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the running frames. So it's actually just going to loop between those. So if the frame gets beyond 5, meaning if it gets to here, we're going to jump back to this point. So it's just going to keep looping between all of these running frames, which is pretty handy. What I had to do was set up a jump where Mega Man would start off strong and rise more slowly as he got toward the peak of his jump, and then as he fell, gravity would constantly increase on his way down, much like the original game. When I made the jump work at first, it worked pretty nice, but he was using one constant value that he was rising and falling at, and it looked like somebody was just moving him up and down as opposed to jumping very naturally like he does in the games. So I set this up to show you some output in the debug window here. Notice that the Y velocity starts off with -65, -42, -28. So these are velocities that he's moving vertically at. And you notice that the first few numbers, they're quite spaced out. There's a lot of distance between 42 and 65, but right at the end here, we're going -8, -5, -3, -2. We go down to where in the final stages, there's only a difference of 1 in between those velocities, meaning Mega Man is moving more slowly as he nears the apex of his jump. And then right here, when we go into the positive, that's when he's moving back down because he's falling. Those aren't increasing or decreasing proportionally, they're just adding 4 each time, but the result is that his jump looks pretty good and he falls and it looks pretty nice like in the original games. Let me show you how I put this together. I start this off by calculating where the apex of his jump is going to be. Right now there's only one elevation in this game, so it's not too important, but I tried to plan for the future here when, hopefully by next week, I'll have objects he can jump on and off of and everything like that, and I'll have to calculate it a little more dynamically. Anyway, if his status is jumping, and this if statement basically means if he's moving up and hasn't reached the peak of the jump yet, then we're going to calculate how much distance is left. That's going to be this jump left variable, and it equals the peak of the jump minus the y offset of where the player is currently at. So this is telling us how much distance we have left to travel upwards in the jump. Then we're going to apply a decreasing vertical force the closer we get to the jump. So the y velocity equals the distance left to the peak times 35%. So we're going to take part of the distance that's remaining to the apex of the jump, and I'm just subtracting 2.5 from it. When I didn't do that, Mega Man would leap, he'd slowly decrease his speed, and then at the peak of the jump he'd freeze there. So I had to do that in order to make the jump work properly. It's a little tricky to just explain, but if you play with code like this and you're making a character jump, as long as you follow this technique where you will take a portion of the distance of your jump, I think you'll be pretty successful and you'll figure it out eventually, because as he's traveling, he's slowing down because it's just using a proportion of the distance left in his jump. So it's just a proportionate relationship. So it slows it down nicely and naturally that way. Now, if he's not rising to the apex of the jump anymore, then the velocity is just going to be set to 0, and we're going to enter the falling state. So that's it for the rising. Now the falling is pretty similar, but in reverse for the most part. If we're falling, we need to apply gravity. So what I'm doing here is, the gravity I believe is a constant I set to something like 4, so it just adds that number to the y velocity every time. The result is that every time this executes, it's adding another 4, another 4. So if he's at the top of the screen and he falls, it's going to be just like in the original games where he falls an increasingly faster until he plummets to his doom down a pit, if you play like me. So when we're at ground level, we're just going to set the velocity to nothing. We're going to start standing and start the timer, which then goes to help me calculate when to blink. I think it's a pretty exciting development, at least it was for me. I don't know if you've done this sort of thing before, if you've tackled these challenges similarly, meaning if you've had a player that jumps and has to limit the frame rate of the animation, you probably did something similar to what I did, but I haven't looked it up, so I don't know how it's generally handled. So if you have done that, I'd like you to let me know what you thought of the way that I handled it. So I don't think I'm going to bother with source code this time because no one's really commented that they found it helpful. I'm assuming if you're watching this, it's more to see how I did these things, and either just for your own entertainment, or you're taking something away by seeing how I did it as opposed to cutting and pasting code. Anyway, if you want some code, let me know. As usual, you can follow me on Twitter, leave some comments, and be encouraging and helpful to me. and I'll see you next time.